But 20 years in the Legion will make a boy man. 20 years in the Legion and they will give you land. 20 years in the Legion, you'll always have a home. 20 years in the legions of Rome.
Good evening, Meridiers in the known world. Welcome to How Shit Works, the show where we look behind the curtain of how things run in Meridiers. As always, I am one of your hosts, Graf Ulrich von Brandenburg. I am a knight, a pelican, and a royal peer. I have opinions. As always, I am joined by my tag team partner, the co-host himself, the Knight of Kittens, the one, the only, Sir Erik Martell.
Hi, everybody. As Ulrich says, I'm Sir Erik Martell, Knight of Kittens, bringer of joy. I am a knight and a landed baron, and I have controversial opinions. Tonight, we're very pleased to have with us the fourth in our Kingdom Officer series, and we're discussing the office of the Kingdom Minister of Arts and Sciences. As such, we have two of the preeminent experts in the field of this office and in the arts. Our current Kingdom ANS officer, Mistress Gwynvin Dynaren, and Mistress Adriana Stoddard, who held the office from 2015 to 2017. Would you please both introduce yourselves and tell the audience a little bit about yourselves?
Sure. I'm Gwynvin Dynaren. Let's start with that one. I probably have the single most mispronounced name in Meridiers, but that's cool. I am the current Kingdom Minister of Arts and Sciences. I'm a Laurel, been a Laurel for a really long time, about 20 years. I'm a Pelican, been a Pelican for about 2 years now. And I took this job because somebody chased me down and made me take it.
And I'm Mistress Adriana Stoddard. I am a Laurel, and I held the office the two people before Gwynvin or Wuennemon. Dang, I should drink every time I pronounce your name.
That would have been a good one.
Would have been perfect.
We don't have that much alcohol.
Yeah, that's the truth.
So, welcome both of you to the show. It's great to have you. I've been looking forward to this show for a little while now for all the good reasons of having my more friends on with me. And this is a specific topic that we'll get to some specific topics. Wow, say that 3 times fast. That I have lots of opinions about, fun opinions that I like to poke Adriana about. All right, so tonight's words for the drinking game are documentation given to us by Mistress Wuennemon.
That's right.
Because, oh my God, competition, as in it's not a competition, only it is, by Mistress Adriana. And research, because my co-host fucking hates me and detests a healthy liver.
Yeah.
So please remember, everyone, this is an opt-in game. You're welcome to drink with us if you wish. You're welcome to not drink. You don't have to drink alcohol. You don't have to drink. You can die of thirst don't die. You can go thirsty the entire show for all I care. It's fine.
If people want to die of thirst, they can die of thirst.
I will not stop them. For the record, I am drinking rum and Coke. It's actually a coconut rum and cherry Coke, but it's disturbingly good. Traveler's rum. You can only get it in Belize. Well, that's where it's made anyway. As always, we'd like to thank Between Two Peers for allowing us to be a licensed franchisee of their drinking game that we stole purposely and intently with permission.
Before we dive into everything, we want to give you our standard disclaimer of this is how everything works in Meridiers. And if you're from a different kingdom, your mileage may vary because every kingdom does their things a little differently, and there's whole lots of cultural kingdom level anthropology, and we're not covering all that. We're sticking strictly to Meridiers. So let's go ahead and get this one question handled right off the bat. What is the difference between an art and a science?
Okay, so I know in the pre-show notes you said it was an easy one. It's actually probably the hardest question you're going to ask tonight. That is a question that really has no good answer and has been debated back and forth, even mundanely. What's the difference between an art and a science? I'd say in the SCA, there's not a ton of difference. And for practical purposes, there really isn't a difference. I would say specifically an art, in the mundane world, an art is something you create. A science is something you study or research. And I would say that kind of crosses over a little bit into the SCA from my standpoint. A science is something that you can maybe create a hypothesis about and research and, make conclusions from that research about. And an art falls more under the, I created it and it's pretty sort of thing. I think a science is a little more practical sometimes than an art is. So, but that's my opinion. And I have a lot of them.
I think that's a great opinion. And I agree with it. I spent a little bit of time in Callantyre, where I was told in Callantyre they have different awards for arts and for sciences. They don't combine them. And so they separate that a little bit more than we do here in Meridies. And when I asked what the difference there would be, the answer that I got was that science is something that doing a science is something that can hurt you or kill you, and an art won't kill you. And I had a ton of reasons why that was wrong. Like cooking could be an art and a science with that, or really anything. But that was the definition that I was given. I don't necessarily agree with it.
Excellent.
Okay. I'd like to always give a practical explanation of it. Take weaving. If you're looking and studying at the spin direction of the threads and the effect that has on the woven product, that's a science. Yeah. However, creating the cloth itself and looking at it and then turning it into something that you wear, that's an art. So.
See, I was gonna go with cooking. If you follow a recipe exactly and it produces the product at the end, that's a science. If you follow the recipe and then take left, right, and center turns and create something fantastically delicious, that's an art.
Well, that works too.
Yeah, it does.
But the ease of that question wasn't about the answer of it. The ease was, it was super easy for us to ask. Really. When we talk about easy questions, we're talking about the easy for us.
Yeah. It's not about us, women. It's about
them.
For the questions, for the answers, all about y'all. All right. So how does one become a Kingdom Arts and Science officer? What are the accepted qualifications? And really, do you have to be a Laurel, or is it just helpful? So, 3 things.
Take that one.
Take it. Oh, you let me take that one? Okay. You don't run fast enough. Let's start with no, you do not have to be a Laurel. Technically speaking, to be the Kingdom Arts and Sciences officer, you have to be a member of the SCA in good standing. You have to put in a letter and be accepted by the Crown and society. And then you have to be warranted. And that's really what it takes. There is nothing in the, even in Meridies, there's nothing in the handbook that says you have to be a Laurel. But you spend a lot of your job as Kingdom Arts and Sciences officer. It's always traditionally been a Laurel in this kingdom, as far as I know. I don't think we've ever had a Kingdom Arts and Sciences officer that wasn't the Laurel. And Adriana, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Right about that. I don't remember even back in the Dark Ages.
But I will say,
on Laurel.
Yeah, I will tell you right now, the Society Arts and Sciences officer is not. He wasn't even a peer. He actually was just made a Pelican recently. So no, you don't have to. And there's nothing in our rules that say in Meridies that say you have to. But you do so much. So much of my job is, and Adriana's job was, and she can back me up on this, is organizing arts and sciences fairs and coming up with judges, talking about judges and talking to artisans and promoting the artisan community, that it's just sort of a natural fit. I would have a hard time figuring out how somebody could do it who wasn't a Laurel, unless they were really tight with a Laurel and sort of had a Laurel deputy or somebody who was sort of, and I spend half my time doing on the Laurel listserv, asking questions, getting opinions, begging people to judge stuff. So yeah, it would be a lot tougher if you weren't a Laurel, but you could do it.
You could. You're right, you could, but it's so much easier to have that have access to that list to ask questions and beg for help, because that is a lot of what you do.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So we talked about the qualifications for a second. What's the process for being selected? And is there a competition to become the Minister of Arts and Sciences?
I will tell
You're
you
not going
right
to get
now,
more than a question before Erik makes sure we drink.
there is not a competition for this job. You're talking about an administrative job with a bunch of artisans. No. Somebody runs you down and begs you to take the office, and somebody eventually either has too much to drink or is just gives in and goes, yeah, I kind of like to run stuff, but there's not as many of us as you would expect.
Or I have to
say that
how things should be run, and I want to make some changes. And the only way to get it done is if I jump in and start organizing.
Yeah. I have an agenda. I have something I want to do. I know from modeling, she felt really strongly about Stellanova and structures and stuff. Sometimes it's because you think all of the judging sheets need to be rewritten, stuff like that. But yeah, typically it's not something that you have a huge pool of people to choose from. No.
Yeah. And for me, I would not have been able to do it without really good deputies that helped me run things, particularly our current Kingdom Seneschal. We would not have had successful Kingdom Arts and Science fairs without her organizational skills.
Yeah, I lean very heavily, especially in the digital age right now. I lean virtual ANS. I'm leaning very heavily on a series of deputies to help organize, run stuff virtually. It's been a steep learning curve.
Yeah, I don't know how you do it. I'm very impressed.
Thank you. I have good people.
Yeah, that's how you do it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. So, what are the actual duties? That was part of that question that we didn't actually get to.
Okay.
What do you do when you do what you do so well?
You primary the single primary responsibility of the Kingdom Arts and Sciences officer is to report to the society, and that's the biggest. That's the number one. Don't put your reports in. It's arts and sciences are one of those things that help us keep our nonprofit status. So that is the pinnacle of the things that I'm supposed to do. Speaking of, I have one due on March 15th. So, but other than that, you are to promote arts and sciences and in the kingdom. You are to I have to organize and help find and host Kingdom Arts and Sciences. I am in charge of helping to set up and run a certain number of regional arts and sciences fairs every year. I'm also technically the head of all of the guilds in Meridies, and also technically the head of Royal University Meridies, although it sort of acts as its own autonomous entity, unless there's like big trouble, which there usually isn't. We kind of let them run on their own. But those are the big things. Adriana, you have anything to add to that?
No, I'm glad that you mentioned rum, because that is a huge deal. That it used to be somewhere else and got moved under arts and sciences, which is where I think it belongs.
See, that's funny, because when I was the chancellor of rum, we were not under arts and sciences.
Right.
We did our own thing. So it was minor. It was considered a minor office, greater office, lesser office of state.
Fun fact: that was one of the reasons I took the office, was to get rum under the arts and science office.
See, it's an agenda.
There is. There is. We all have one. I wouldn't have taken it if there weren't things that I felt passionately about. I have my own agenda that I'm sure you'll want to know about later.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. So now that you're in the office, you already talked about, you report to the Society of Arts and Sciences officer. How does that go? Do you have to do it all alone? You talked about your deputies. How many, what kind of deputies do you have? And what all do you report to the corporate office? Wow, that's a lot of questions in that one question.
I got it. I can multitask this.
Do it.
I have 3 regional deputies, one for the state of Georgia, one for the state of Alabama and Kentucky, and one for Florida. Well, Alabama and maybe Florida and Kentucky. Off the top of my head, I can't remember which was which, but all of the states, basically I have one for each region. And they report, the local arts and sciences officers report to them, and they collate that information and send it to me. And the funny thing is, though, is that the stuff that they send to me, for by and large, is not what I send to corporate.
Right.
As a matter of fact, we were talking about one of the things I want to do is revamp the reporting system. And I'm actually working with a special deputy right now, Drusilla, to revamp the arts and sciences reports to be more reflective of the things that I need. The things that I report to corporate are laurels that are made, anybody who's done something, particularly cool, arts and sciences competitions we may have had. Was there anything outstanding there? Are there any problems? What's the mood of A&S in the kingdom? And so some of that stuff I get sort of by osmosis through the reports, but there's not anything like, I'm not sending up a list of every single thing everybody does. And I think I think people think that we do, that we strip all that stuff out and send it up, but I have to keep a record of it, because if somebody out in the mundane world, the government decided that we didn't deserve our nonprofit status, they would come to me and say, hey, send us the reports for the last however many years from your deputies. And so we could show all of the classes and everything that's being done. But by and large, the stuff I send is nowhere near the same stuff that they send to me. Now, I like to look at that stuff. I don't know about Adriana, but I like to look at that stuff, and I read those reports just to kind of see what's going on in the kingdom, A&S wise.
Sometimes, again, a good reason why it's good to be a Laurel. It's because when you read those, you can go, oh my gosh, I had no idea this person was doing this. Yeah. And then you can actually discuss it with other people. So yeah, but the reports that I was getting, that I got from the regional deputies, just like you, that was not the questions that I was being asked from corporate.
Yeah.
Outstanding. So we've covered.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to finish answering the question. I don't think I covered. I do have other deputies. I have a deputy that maintains the webpage, the Arts and Sciences webpage, Justina, and I have a deputy, at least 1 or 2 special projects deputies right now, who are, and I've got a deputy who's Guild's deputy. But like one of the special projects going on right now, Mistress Una is helping us create at least 1 new judging sheet for a new category, because we realized we had a problem and needed a different type of judging sheet. And then we are slowly trying to go through and update and fix anything we feel it needs to be fixed on the judging sheets for the rest of the categories. So special deputy stuff.
Special deputy stuff. All right, so we've covered what the deputies seem to do, but how do you choose the deputy, who's going to be the deputy for those positions? Like, what qualities and skill sets are you looking for?
Somebody who's organized. Honestly, I'm not necessarily looking for, now for some of the special deputy stuff, like the project that Una's working on right now, I'm looking for a Laurel who's got experience judging over the years. And she and I helped create a set of judging sheets along 20 years ago. And so I know she has that special skill set that I need. Drusilla was helping to work on with her on one of the new judging sheets, because she had an entry with scientific research paper versus a mundane research paper, like a literature research paper. Very different animals, it turns out. And so she's a scientist and Una's a scientist on the outside world. So we wanted them working together. Now, otherwise, I'm really looking for people who are organized, will send in their reports on time, and may or may not have anything to do with actual arts and sciences in the mundane world. I mean, a good protege is an awesome deputy to have for a reporting deputy.
100% agree.
And I'm fixing to advertise pretty soon for a replacement deputy for one of my positions, a reporting position. they're ready to go.
Okay, so the most well-known activity for the Arts and Sciences Office is Kingdom A&S. I mean, hands down, this is when people think of the Kingdom A&S officer, they think of Kingdom A&S. How much input do you guys have in how that runs? Is it all just decided by your office? Is it, do you work with the Laurels? How do you come about laying out how that competition is going to work?
It's our baby.
Yeah.
I mean, we do work with the Laurels mostly. Here are the areas that we need help judging, and yeah, it's our baby. That's what we do.
Yeah, we're in charge of, there's a list of duties in the Kingdom A&S handbook. But in all honesty, you're working hand in hand with the Laurels as far as getting judges goes. Otherwise, it's really, you're in charge as the Laurel in charge, or as the Arts and Sciences officer in charge. You're in charge of making sure there are judging sheets, making sure there's a display area, making sure there's plenty of room for that, making sure you have, you communicate with the entrance and they know when and where to expect what's happening, the schedule. You're in charge of special circumstances. Let's say I've got somebody entering something that can't be put in the hall and has to be somewhere else. I mean, it's all the details from the biggest, where is it being held, to the smallest, making sure you have enough pencils and you have cups for the brewing and venting contest, brewing and venting competition. Ha, gotcha. Competition.
So, and bear with me, Erik. This question has a lot of bits to it, so I'm going to dig through them. First off, that it made me think. So, because I never would have thought of that. If I'm doing a brewing and venting entry, I don't provide my own cups. The A&S officer provides the cups for me, because that's kind of cool.
It depends. It depends, okay. But you don't want.
Yeah, I mean, I think you should, but if you don't, we're not gonna leave people hanging and say you got to drink out of the same bottle.
Yeah, exactly. If you need a Dixie cup, especially in this day of COVID, if you need a Dixie cup, we'll get you a Dixie cup.
We got Dixie cup.
Yeah.
Actually, there was a bunch of Dixie cups in my box when I got the office.
Mm-hmm.
So.
All right. That reminded me of something, but I'll come back to that at the end of the show.
Okay.
So what's the difference between a regional and a local fair? Because you guys also are in charge of, making sure that the fairs happen all over the kingdom.
A regional fair, we have a certain number of regional fairs. The regional fair, I'm in charge of working with the hosting group to make sure that the regional portion of the fair happens. You can actually have a regional fair and a local fair happening at the exact same event. As a matter of fact, with Sword and Mistletoe, Sword and Missile Magna Fair is what we're laughing at now. There are both. There's a regional fair and a local fair going on at the time, almost simultaneously. Some people choose to enter the regional, some people choose to enter the local, some people choose to enter both with the same thing. So I'm not in charge of the local fairs. I'm there to consult if, say, a local fair needed me. But by and large, the regional level and the kingdom level are our bailiwick.
Yeah. And a local fair doesn't have to follow the Kingdom Arts and Sciences format. A local fair would not have to use our judges sheets or our judging, our point system or anything. It can be completely different.
And one of the things we do with the regional fair and the Kingdom Fair is we are looking for Gulf Force champions. And those wouldn't be found at a local fair. That is sort of a function of that regional too. And it's really funny because it used to be you entered the regionals for feedback, and a lot of people still do this, but it's not absolutely necessary. Back in my day, 20 years ago, you didn't enter Kingdom A&S unless you'd already entered regional fair, and So you can, these days, you just enter regional, you can just enter Kingdom A&S, you can enter both. A lot of artisans do. You enter the regional fair, get feedback on your project, make improvements, hopefully, and enter it again in Kingdom. So.
All right. So the final part of this is which events typically hold regional fairs?
Well, the two that there are two that are actually in the handbook listed as regional fairs, but there's usually at least 4 regional fairs every year, 2 of which are pretty static and 2 sort of tend to move around a little bit. I know Midwinter Arts and Sciences is one of them, and then Magna Fair, Sword and Mistletoe / Magna Fair, that's considered one of the premier every year. Other than that, Iris Fair often is one. Men here a lot of times has, and we do try to spread them out. We could have more than 4 if it's requested. The office tries to work with just about anybody who wants a regional fair. We try to make sure the different parts of the kingdom get served, so there's something close enough at least every couple of years for someone. Try to have one at Gadelop a lot of times to make sure the people on the southern coast have access to them. But we want all of our artisans in the kingdom to be served. So.
You got anything, Adriana?
No, I'm looking at Katarina's.
This is 1 minute. All right. So right quick, I've been reminded of a couple of things that I want to make sure we get shout outs on right quick. If you look in the top right-hand corner of the screen, you'll see our new logo that Duke Baru did for us. I'd like to thank him for that. That's super sharp. That, and we're going through these questions pretty quick, everyone, and we've got some other questions that we can go to, but the very end of the show is powered by the live feed questions. So if you have questions for us from the audience, make sure you put them in the live feed in the comments, and my lovely wife Graf and Katarina will pull them out and we'll cover them at the end of the show. Erik?
So this is another one of our multi-part questions, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it together because I think it will inform your answers and I'll let you to make a more comprehensive answer for these questions. So just go ahead and get started. Let's say I want to enter a regional fair competition. How much documentation of my research is enough? Do I need to write a research? Do I need to write a research paper to enter? And what if I have never written documentation for a competition before?
It's 7, by the way.
I officially hate you now. Yes.
Dang.
Woo! Adriana, you want to take that?
Well, let's take that apart a little bit. So, entering a fair, a regional fair, then your documentation can be anywhere from a brief summary and page. Sorry, yes, I did say the word. To several pages and a research paper. Sorry. Anyway, so it doesn't have to be huge, but it does need to be enough to tell the people judging it that what it is, where it's from, why you did it, where you got your research from. And we have a great resource on the Arts and Sciences page called Guided Documentation. I think it's 5 questions. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it's right around 5. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like 5 questions that you need to answer. You can just answer those in 1-sentence answers. It will show in your judging scores, but that's the minimum that you have to do. You know, if you have a great project but not a great documentation, they're gonna balance out in your final score.
They will. Documentation is one of those things that people are probably the single part of the ANS process that people are the most scared of.
Yep.
Here you've made this really cool thing, you put your heart and soul in it, and now you have to sell it to someone is kind of the way people think of it. And that's not really the case. What we want to know is, and if you can answer, I did this, give us your process. This is how I did it. This is why I did it. This is what I used to do it. And these are my resources. You got it. And that's why it's about 5 questions. Now, you've got compulsive people who have, a notebook this thick with 42 appendices, and they're all tabbed and underlined and out and highlighted. And I say that with all respect because I was that person. Project notebook this big. And
you were Alan's apprentice.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the thing I dig, but you also have people who give you, 2 pages and it's plenty. There are certain things you have to have on certain types of projects. I will say that. And the biggest thing I would tell somebody who wants to enter arts and sciences, if you're not sure what your documentation should look like, look at the judging sheet. Every judging sheet for every category is on the Kingdom Arts and Sciences website under forms. So look it up and it'll tell you what we're looking for under each scoring category. We're looking, is it authentic? What was your artistry and technique? What was your documentation like? And all of those things are covered. And it tells you each
institutions and why.
Yeah.
And if you don't know, there's a ton of Laurels. Call one of us.
Exactly. And I think people are kind of scared to do that and think it's like cheating, and it's not.
No.
If somebody called me up as Kingdom Arts and Sciences officer and said, I have never done this before, I have this documentation I've written, I think it's okay. Would you, if I email it to you 2 weeks before the competition, would you read it and give me some advice? Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, we just wouldn't judge it. We wouldn't judge that then. We would have, but
I can certainly read it. Or Adriana can read it.
Yeah. We want to help people. We don't want it to be a big mystery. We want everybody to have the understanding and knowledge to do well and feel like they've done well.
Yes, we really do.
So just so you know, Gwendy, that was 3 documentations in there.
And 4, now that you added that one.
Correct. 4 of the D word. Not the D word you're thinking of, the other D word.
It's a good thing somebody gave me really good gin.
It is. I've already had to get a refill. Someone pointed out that it was not supposed to count in the questions, but there was only, when Erik asked that question, there was only 1 of those words actually in the question. He added the other 6.
He ad-libbed.
I read this question bad. Yeah, he is.
All right. So you kind of answered this before, but I want to go ahead and cover it anyway. Do I have to enter my project in a regional competition before Kingdom Arts and Sciences, or can I just go straight to the Premier League, or if you're American, to the big leagues?
You can go straight to Kingdom Arts and Sciences, but I would recommend you enter it in a regional fair first to get feedback so that you can make corrections if necessary to your project or to your documentation before entering it in Kingdom ANS. That's why we have regionals and Kingdom. Do you have to? No. If you're somebody and if you're an Uyang who has super skills, mad skills, and knows that her project is put together and it's tops, fine. Enter it in Kingdom ANS.
Yeah.
So
we have people who enter the same piece in every regional fair to get more feedback. So you don't have to limit it to one regional fair. You can, or you don't have to at all. But more feedback is, for me anyway, more feedback is good because it helps me better my project. Go ahead.
If you listen to it. If you listen to the feedback.
Yes.
Yeah. So just I want to tag on to that for a second because you said enter it in several different regionals to get more feedback. So do you try to make sure that person doesn't get the same judges
Yes.
if they do that, or do you want them to get like one of the same judges so that you have a reference to the previous entry?
It depends.
I'm just curious.
It depends on who you have. Sometimes you don't have the same pool of judges. In that
Right.
sort of case, I would probably try to make sure they had one of the old and a couple of the new, just so that you have a comparison, or 3 new. And I know, like a lot of people, if you've already judged something at one regional fair and it shows up at Kingdom Arts and Sciences, even if you're not assigned to it as a judge, you probably gravitate to where it's being judged to see what changes have been made.
Because you told me.
So,
Yeah, absolutely. You want to see that someone has taken. We spend time judging a piece and trying to give good feedback. We kind of like to see if that feedback has been accepted and incorporated.
yeah. Especially in things like cooking entries, stuff that's easy. We understand that some things, if you've done a calligraphy and illumination entry, you may not be able to make corrections on it.
Yeah.
You know?
But
And-
you can make changes in your documentation acknowledging that.
Yeah. But if you're doing a cooking event, if you're doing a cooking entry and Mistress Rosamond comes along and says, you could do this and get this flour here and here's this source,
Mhm.
you might want to do that. Yeah.
Excellent. So let's assume that I'm new to the world of arts and sciences fairs. And I am. But what is the best way for me to get started?
Well, it depends. What are you interested in? That would be the big thing, is find something, pick something that you're interested in and start researching it. So many people, we get so many, how do I say this, Adriana? I guess bluntly.
Documented.
Yeah, you get so many things that are created first, and then people go back and try to document what they've done. It's the reverse of what should happen. If you're doing arts, there's a difference between an arts and I try to tell people that there's a difference between an arts and sciences regional competition entry and this really cool thing that I made. Sometimes they're the same, but not always. And the big difference is, and I think that's where a lot of our trouble comes in, is you have 42 of your best friends look at you and go, "Oh my God, that thing is so awesome. Why aren't you entering that?" And they go, "Oh, why don't you enter that?" Well, if you haven't already done the research into it and it's just this really cool thing that you made, maybe it should be entered, maybe it shouldn't. The correct steps are figure out what that thing is you're interested in, do some research for it, figure out how it was made, what you made it from, and then do that thing. And meanwhile, because you've researched it, kind of keep up with, take some pictures along the way, make some notes as you're doing it. And all of it sort of, the documentation just sort of tumbles out after that.
Yeah.
And yes, I know I need to drink about 42 times.
Just 4.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. So far,
Does
I've
that
already drank more in this show than I drank in any other show. So, and we're only 40 minutes into the show.
I know it's bad. Erik, did that answer your question?
Not only did that answer my question, but it brought a song to my heart from watching Ulrich drink.
I don't really need encouragement.
Yeah.
True. Very true.
Oh, all right. So let's say I have an unusual project that I've been working on for quite a while.
You do.
And I do, and I'm not ready yet. Say, for example, a period medical device, because I'm not saying what it is, because not everyone knows, and I don't want to ruin the fun.
Or have someone steal it from you.
Or have someone steal it from you, right?
Yeah.
But let's say there's no category really that I can find for it. What happens when I show up at a fair, and how does it get judged?
Well, worst case scenario, we put it in a category called miscellaneous.
Yep.
Best case scenario, we look at it, the experts, so to speak, look at it and figure out for you, help you figure out which category it belongs in. It may fit in something loosely, and then we go and we try to find people to judge it. Here's something I will tell you, and Adriana can back me up on this. If you know that your project is an unusual medical device, then letting us know ahead of time that you're bringing said project helps us find judges who can adequately judge your project. Okay. If you just show up at the door you get what you get.
Project gets quotes. Is it not a just because it's abnormal doesn't makes it a quotable project?
Maybe. I just like showing off on my bling. It's
That's
handy.
nice bling. That is quality bling.
It's quality bling. So
yeah.
What can I do?
And in addition to what was just said, if you have an unusual project and you let us know ahead of time, people come out of the woodwork to judge something unusual, and people love to look at it and talk about it and ask you questions about it. So it ends up being a lot more interactive and a lot more fun for both the participant and the judges and the populace who are walking by and looking at things.
I actually have had somebody recently contact me, and I'm not going to say what the project is, for just because, and say, "Hey, I have this thing I've always wanted to enter, and there is a category for it, but it won't fit in the hall. It's not the right fit for that. What can I do?" And I was like, "Well, that's my job. We'll come to you. We'll figure it out. We'll be in, and that honestly is one of my crusades, is to try to bring in people who are not what we would consider typical fair participants and typical arts and sciences folks, and try to give them a home with us, because I feel like they fit. If you want to do some strange and unusual arts and sciences project, you're out on the archery field and you have researched and created an archery competition based on period format, and you want to run it, then it's our job as Laurel in an arts and sciences venue to come meet you where you are. You don't have to bring your competition to the hall, because quite frankly, we don't want to die. But we need to come to you and help you where you are. And Ulrich knows how I feel about this. I think there are a lot of underserved communities in our kingdom and in the society that really fit under the heading of arts and sciences. I think archery fits pretty well. I think siege weaponry fits pretty well in the science competition sort of area. I think that there's a lot of
someone, you can kill someone with it. It's a science.
Yes.
There you go.
Equestrian fits in certain areas, and it's our job as an ANS community to meet you halfway or even further and come out and see what you're doing and support that.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good research in the rapier community on. I'm sorry, I thought somebody else was talking. In the rapier community, doing actual footwork that was practiced in the period.
Yeah, and if you think that there's not a category, but you want it, because actually that's how historical technology came about, and also the category of historical fighting techniques came about as well. We've got a category for that now, because somebody came along and said, "Hey, this is a science and I want to do this. How do I make it happen?" And we created a judging sheet for it, and based on what they were doing, and it was really cool. See, the thing is what people don't realize is that at our heart, we're just a bunch of arts and sciences geeks who think that new, interesting, cool stuff is really what flips our switch. And we're like, oh, please do it. I want to see it.
Yeah, do it.
Please. We love it.
You heard the lady. Do it. So, how does judging work? Specifically, what is the scoring system and who decides on the score?
Scoring is done based on the judging sheets. I can't say there's like one system. Loosely, our scoring is based on 20 points. And of course, the more of those points you get, the better your entry did, based on the criterion for that particular entry. Now, there are about 25 different categories and about 6 different judging sheets, based on whether it's a static entry or performing art or historical combat or research paper or a science paper or whatever. I mean, I could go on and on. But what we do is you sit down, and there are at least 3, usually about 3 laurels, sometimes ovos too, combination of, we like to have at least 3 to 4 judges, along with the entrant, because we do in-person judging now, sit down, look at the entry, evaluate the entry with the entrant there, talk it over, and let them know kind of why, how their documentation, how their entry, their process fits the criterion for that particular category, and talk over what we think there is for a score. And, and meanwhile, we're talking through that process with the entrant right there. So there's no misunderstanding about why we picked something. We used to do it without the entrant, and that was a terrible system in that it was faster, but it was not as good. There were a lot of misunderstandings about why did I get this score? Why did I get a 2 on this category, but I got a 5 on this category, sort of thing. So there's no more.
Oh, go ahead. And if you only have 30 or 45 minutes to judge an entry, then you're trying to write enough, your comments so that the entrant can understand it when they take it back and read through it. And so that other people next time can understand it, because we keep those judging sheets. No, that's not right.
Well, the entrant gets the judging sheet, but I do keep track of the scores. And what's really great right now is with virtual, we also have electronic scoring sheets. And so we are actually keeping all of those, which is really nice. So we can look at the consistency of what's going on. And I will say that we do read through all of those judging sheets before whoever the Kingdom Arts and Sciences officer is. I read every single one of them, comment by comment, to make sure that your experience is the best experience there can be. You're not going to get anybody snarky comment or anything. Although, honestly, I think that's sort of a misnomer, because I've never, in all the years that I've been judging, I've never seen somebody write something just mean and ugly on a sheet. It's just really not how we're programmed. Most of us, and I can't speak for every single Laurel, because there's always that exception in every group, but most of us, the majority of us, love arts and sciences and want you to love them too. Because, like I said, we're just geeks. We really are. I'm a Baltic geek, as you can tell. I mean, I can sit down and talk to you about Baltic stuff for hours, and it would probably torture some of you, but the rest of you would be like, yeah, that's really cool. And that's really who we are.
Yeah.
But, shadow judging. Adriana, you want to talk about shadow judging?
Shadow judging. So if you have never entered anything, or even if you have entered something, but you don't really know what the judging process is, and you do like to sit in on that to watch how that goes, ask to be a shadow judge. Mm-hmm. We'd like to have a little bit of warning so we can put you in the proper category with the proper judges. A lot of our judges love shadow judges. They're like, come, let me teach you. This is what we're looking for. This is what we expect. This is what a perfect score would look like. This is where this is off the perfect score just slightly, and so you understand the judging process, if you want, even before you enter.
Yeah, it demystifies it a lot. I've had so many people come along who shadow judged and said, oh my gosh, that was the best. It's not nearly so scary now. You get to see the judges in action. You get to see them talking with the entrant about something. And it really makes you feel like much more comfortable with the process, and with you get a chance to see documentation. You get a chance to see a project done and how it's submitted and entered. Yes, I know.
Yeah.
Research. You get to see judges being
now we're up to 7
about the project.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I'm gonna have to catch up with your words. Hold on a minute. Oh my God, we're at 7, by the way. If you didn't drink during that entire time, we're at 7. Holy crap. You guys are super passionate. I love that. Okay. Reading. This is going to be fun. All right. So, full disclosure, TJ writes our scripts. Sorry, Mistress Adriana writes our scripts. So she threw this one in there because we argue about this probably every time. Probably every time there's an A&S fair or competition. We have an argument about this on some level.
A discussion. It's a passionate discussion.
It is a passionate discussion.
And disagree.
So, how do we know who won? What does it mean when people are recognized for their entries and scores during court. Before you answer, let me give a little backstory on how this argument goes. Someone is called up we have court. There was an A&S fair that day. Someone is called up in front of court, and they're lauded for their whatever the highest score was, or if 3 people got perfect scores of 20, they are lauded for it, which they deserve. They've done very well. I'm not taking anything from them. But then the passionate discussion between Adriana and I happens of, see, these people won. And she's like, no, they didn't win. And I'm like, they were called up in court. They won renown, and renown is a gift. Renown is a victory. And so I'm like, why don't you just call it competitions? Call it what it is.
And
because I guarantee you,
you
that Erik and I are constantly in competition with each other about everything that we do.
My response has been to Graf Ulrich that it's not a competition because people aren't competing against each other. They are striving for the best score that project can have.
Okay, I have to. Okay, wait. Okay. So there's categories. There's categories. Does everyone in that category get a scroll and a prize?
No, nobody gets a scroll or a prize.
No one gets a scroll or a prize at an
no, unless it is a specially sponsored category. Like I could decide that I wanted to sponsor Baltic costuming entries. If there was 1 or 2, then I could say, hey, this was the best one in that category, and that would be a competition. I would have a personal competition for people. But arts and sciences as a whole is not a competition. And the only reason we don't let me explain to you why we don't like that phrase. Arts and sciences is scary enough.
Yes.
Arts and sciences is scary enough for people. And Ulrich and I have had this conversation many times. And it's not like going out and taking out, I love you too. It's scary enough that it's not like going out and hitting other people with a stick. It's you have put your heart and soul and personal whatever into this thing. And you're now putting it out on a table and saying, judge me.
Yeah.
We don't even like to use the word judge. We like feedback because we are kinder and gentler. We understand there is a lot of stress in that process for people. You know, it's supposed to be about feedback. It's supposed to be about us learning about what you're doing and teaching other people about what you're doing, showing what you're doing. And so really the only person you are competing with is yourself in that regard. We do not have a champion of the arts anymore in Meridia's. It's been gone for a long time. There's always and let me tell you what, I know you got your hand up and I'm ignoring it.
Ignore it. Just keep talking.
There's a lot of debate in the Laurel Circle a lot of times as to whether or not we should bring it back or not bring it back. And even the Laurel Circle split on that. You know, I don't have a problem with competition, but I got a really thick skin. But not everybody does. Not everybody's good with that. Not everybody's good with that, you know, that process. So
and we want people to participate. We're not trying to keep people out.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
So we're at 7, by the way.
I know.
All right. So 2 things. I'm going to address my issue with the statement of we don't have ANS champions anymore. I give you Gulf Wars. We pick 2. We send them. They are clearly the winners of whatever ANS has gone on. It's like sending it is. You call them, what do we call them? We call them our ANS champions.
Yes.
Well, would you prefer that we call them representatives?
Yeah, we do that.
I'm fine with champions. I'm just saying call them what they are. The second portion is, and hear me out. This is my argument that it is a competition. So the 4 of us enter in arts and sciences fair, and my entry scores is 16. Adriana's entry scores is 17. Wuennemon's entry scores is 18. Eric's entry scores a 20. He gets announced in court that he had a perfect score. He won renown that none of us won because he's the only. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying that if you have one particular person that, or a group of people who get that recognition, there is a prize. Because if you think renown is not a prize, we have a different level of discussion that needs to happen in a completely different show that's going to be really fun.
You win renown to the populace. Yes. You win renown to the populace, but I have a secret to tell you. We discuss all of the entries and all of their scores in the Laurel Circle after that.
Absolutely. Yes.
Oh, sure.
All of them. So everybody in that regard is getting renown with us. If you enter
popular renown.
Well, popular renown, sure. But that's not a prize per se as far as winning something other than, hey, so-and-so did something cool. You know, we don't want to end. You know, we could. You put us in a position. You put us in a position of we either have to enter. We either have to tell everybody's score or nobody's score, and I don't know how to fix that. That's, you know.
I'm just trying to give you something to think about.
Especially when we've had a full day.
Yeah.
That we've had this fair and people have brought their entries in and we spent time with them. We can't say nothing. At the end of the day, we can't say, "Hey, we had a fair."
And maybe somebody doesn't want us telling that they got a 5 on whatever it was they did, or a 15, or a 12, or whatever.
Or they might not feel an 18 is good enough.
Yeah. Most of the time, we only usually give renown to the 20s because it does take a lot to get a perfect score.
It does.
It does. So.
All right, Eric.
So, you feel good about that, Ulrich? You get that out of your system? All right. So I just want to say this. There are those of us who believe that renown is the only prize. That said, though, aside from dealing with Ulrich, what is the most difficult part of your job? And how have you handled the transition from in-person to virtual SCA?
You know, for arts and sciences competitions, it's been interesting. We've had to not have some categories. That's been the hardest thing. It's really hard to judge cooking. It's really hard to judge, really pretty much impossible to judge cooking when you can't taste the entry. It's impossible to judge brewing and vintning when you can't taste the entry. Other than that, it's been a fairly smooth transition to the point that we may continue with some virtual aspects of judging. We've talked about it so that we don't have to spend all day. Believe it or not, we like going and seeing other parts of the site on the weekend of an A&S fair, not spending all day, 24/7 from 7 o'clock in the morning until, right before court, judging stuff and giving feedback. We like actually visiting with our friends and sitting out in the, seeing other things and watching the fighting and stuff like that. We may actually consider keeping parts of it, doing some of the judging online and some of the stuff in person. The hardest part is the stuff that really needs to be done in person versus the stuff that can be looked at virtually adequately. I don't know if I answered your question. I've had so many.
Oh, no, you actually did completely. I think you answered the next one too.
I do too.
Hey, Connell, if you're watching, she's going to need another drink.
Yeah. Oh, dear God.
Mistress Adriana, would you like to add to that, or has it just gone off the rails?
No. I think she answered it very well. We do like to do other things. We like to see our friends, and there are some parts of our affairs that can still be online. I mean, submitting documentation ahead of time freaks some people out, but because I know a lot of people who are typing documentation on their way to the site. And so having to do that a week in advance may be difficult for some people.
What's really nice, though, about that process is that it gives the judges, if we have it in advance, it gives us a chance to get people in who have more expertise. And I will say that's one thing about online virtual ANS is that it has become society-wide in some places. If we know that there's nobody in our kingdom that has a specialty in, 3rd century Roman fishing bobs,
Somebody that does.
there's somebody on here that does, we can go out and say, hey, we got this entry. Would you like to, give us some input on this? So it really expands how we can better serve you as far as feedback goes for whatever it is you're doing. It makes the large society become a smaller village. And that has been awesome. And we've seen that a lot. We've had several out of kingdom judges who've said, hey, I saw that you were having this ANS event and I saw you had this particular entry and we really want to, can we sit on this? And it's been pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So we've said all this about how great we were doing on time earlier. And then I got involved and we're no longer doing great on time, but that's fine. So do you expect that some of the virtual aspects of the arts and sciences will continue once we get back to normal?
Yes. How's that for you?
That's awesome.
That was excellent.
So we're going to have to skip the unless you have something really important that you need to.
Right. I have to say the dumbest one. I have to.
You get it.
It's my thing.
You get it.
Okay.
Go.
So every time we get to the myths, I purposely go to the stupidest one I can find and I cover it first because I'm always stunned by the magnitude of the stupid. So here we go.
There's no such thing as a stupid question.
No, there are.
Let me answer that. No, Connell is not in charge of the laurels.
He is. I was there.
No.
I was there.
That's a story. That's a story for the after show.
It is.
I can't be judged because there are no judges qualified to judge me. Does that level of a-hole actually exist in the really real world?
Yes, but I wouldn't say they're an a-hole. I would say that just means that they are really specialized and they feel like nobody else probably has expertise in their specialization area. My answer to that would be if your documentation is good enough, I don't care if you are researching Lithuanian shoe stitches. I can judge you if you've explained your process and well enough and told me what your resources are. I can tell if they're good resources. And if I have them ahead of time, I can go look at them and see and compare. And I can actually tell whether or not you know what you're talking about for the most part.
Oh. Okay, you're right.
You're right.
Okay, so normally we would go down. We make sure we pull a bunch of questions from other experts, and normally we would go through those right now, but we have run through that time, so it's quite probable that we will in the future have a bonus episode where we bring you guys back and try to address those if that's okay. Normally we don't do that, but for the offices we have specific people we can bring back unless your predecessors are willing to do it. But we do have some live feed questions that we need to get to, and we're in that time. We'll get through as many as we can. So from Mistress Mittens, aside from the documentation and the surrounding issues, what's the hardest part of the job? Documentation doesn't count there. It was part of the question.
Finding judges.
Yeah.
And convincing people that laurels aren't going to eat them.
Yep. Yeah.
Breathe, Ulrich. Breathe.
This would be part of Connell's flesh-eating laurel skit.
Yes. They all think we are. They all think we are. We're not.
Okay.
I swear to God, they're a really nice group of people.
You heard it here first on Hound and Stag. There are no flesh-eating laurels.
Not in Meridia's. I won't vote.
Really?
Don't pin me in.
I am not being paid to say this. Okay, so let's try to move on and cover something. What level of involvement does the Kingdom ANS officer have with the Gulf Wars Inter-Kingdom ANS competitions like the Warpoint ANS and the Open ANS, and that's asked by Master Nick Chemist because he does that.
Do you want me to take this?
Yeah, go for it, because I haven't had to do this yet.
Yeah, I know. So on the Open ANS, that goes, we share that Open ANS with Glen Aubin. And so we take turns on the years with the Open ANS who leads it, but we both kingdoms participate in the organization of that every year. So that is a Meridian Glen Aubin thing for the Open ANS. On the Warpoint ANS and the champions, the ANS champions battle.
For the competition.
We're involved in that. We assist our entrants to make sure they understand, because it's different. It's different than our ANS fairs.
Yes, it is.
There's a different point spread. That's a 25 points instead of 20 points. And you have a 3-foot space that you can put your entry in. And you're judged on the appearance of your entry. That's the extra 5 points in that. So we do help in that, but that's run by Anstiora or Trimaris.
And we are required to provide a certain number of judges for the Warpoint judging. I think it's usually 5 laurels. And we also help contribute for the ANS Open. We also help contribute, even on our off years, to prizes for some of the entrants.
Right.
There's usually a prize basket. Each kingdom provides a prize basket to give things out to people who enter that we think are cool. No, it's not competition.
There are prizes and judges.
And
We're
points.
and points. We're no longer using the word judge. We're using provisional feedback providers.
Okay.
PFPs.
Yeah.
There you go.
And year before last, Anstiora pulled the actual winning of a war point. The war points just split for some reason. They didn't think it was a competition.
Yeah.
So there's not a winner.
Hold on, wait. So there's a war point, but no one gets it.
No, they split it 50-50.
Split 50,
But then it's not a war point. It's a
War half point.
I don't know what to tell you. I'm not.
We're all winners here.
It wasn't my decision. It wasn't my decision.
We're going to
wasn't-
write a strongly worded letter to Anstiora.
That is what we have been trying to
Email.
tell you all along, is there are only winners here in ANS land, because you are learning something, you are teaching something, you are creating something. Win, win, win.
That's it.
All
I
right,
don't know.
so
I bet Ulrich and I could be losers.
if you believe in yourself and you try hard enough and don't do your documentation right, you too can be a loser.
I just want it known that the Laurels did not say that.
No,
No,
not.
I am not. I never have to worry about that issue in my SCA career. All right, so moving on. I have the impression that we are supposed to enter a thing at a local competition or fair before thinking about a regional ANS. Is that correct? And that is from
No.
Susan Tangent Young.
No. Local fairs and regional fairs are different. We encourage you, like I said before, we encourage you to enter regional before you enter Kingdom ANS so you can get feedback, but local to regional, not necessary. Different animals.
Yep.
Locals could be, hey, I like this thing, put a bead in a cup.
Yeah.
Regionals are, hey, we got this list of things that you need to satisfy, and we're going to give you feedback on PFPs.
That never goes well.
Yeah.
There's a list of things I need to satisfy. I'm already in bad trouble.
Yeah, well.
So you can enter a regional and then Kingdom ANS. Can you bring a project back down to enter elsewhere, or is that a one-way process?
It's a
No,
one-way
I'm
process.
not going to attempt to pronounce this gentle's SCA name because it will come off as rude, and I'm going to call them Bradley.
Nope, it's a one-way process. Once you enter a project in Kingdom A&S, you can't bring it back.
Nope.
All right. That's good to know.
All right. Well, that was quick and concise. All right. No, that's cool. Sometimes the answer needs to be no. All right. So there's been occasional discussion of making an online resource for great projects and documentation can serve as an example for future entries. Has that moved forward, or is it still a someday idea? And that is from Sir Jean-Claude.
Sir Jean-Claude, sounds like you want to be a special deputy.
I think he's
I
volunteering.
knew that was coming.
I'm pretty sure he raised his hand.
Yes, I believe he did just raise his hand. No, that is still a someday idea. You've got to get, here's the problem with that. When we put, it's almost like a copyright thing. When you put something on the Kingdom Arts and Sciences page, it becomes property of the SCA. And a lot of people don't want that. A lot of people don't want their documentation out there and on the A&S webpage to stay there because they may want to write a complete anachronist someday. Heck, I don't know what they're doing. They may be out and doing real research in real life towards a book or a cookbook or something. And a lot of that can get in the way. So it's a little bit of a sticky wicket. And sometimes things change over time. Now, if people have a really neat project that they want to volunteer to have put out there as you got a 20, here's your documentation. Yes, I'll be happy to pass it, to scan it and send it to my ANS web person and have it put up so somebody else can see your awesomeness on there every time they click.
So I've got a quick follow-up. You mentioned there that maybe they do this thing in real life. Mm-hmm. I've heard it after an ANS competition, and TJ knows. Sorry, Adriana knows where I'm going. I've heard it after an ANS competition. This person didn't get X score from the judges. This person didn't get X score because they do that in their mundane life, and we expect more from them, even though normally this would have been a Y score.
I fundamentally disagree with that. I can't say it's never happened before, but I think a lot of us have come a long way in that regard. If you do it mundanely, fantastic that you can find a way to support your passion in your mundane life as well. But I'm never going to hold it against you. And we have several Laurels now who do stuff in their mundane life that they are an SCA Laurel for. So yeah. I think we kind of busted that myth a little bit over the last decade or so. And if I ever hear it, I will not be a happy camper with that because that is just a wrong attitude to take. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, don't be sorry. That's a great attitude. Like that just sounded stupid to me. Like you can make money at it, so we're going to judge you more harshly.
Yeah, that's wrong. That's wrong.
For the record, I knew the answer to that question. I just wanted to make you say it.
Okay. Don't make you mean.
So our next question is a multi-parter, and it comes from Sir Connell McDale, a wise
who's in charge of both of you.
Knight.
He's not in charge of
He is asked. Aside from my being in charge of the Laurels, have either of you had a bad judging experience, either as a judge or one of the judged? How did it affect you, and how did you overcome it or learn from it?
I had a really bad experience the very first entry I ever made in regional fair. And I didn't enter anything for several years after that. I was like, okay, I'm done. So it makes me very sensitive. What it did was number one, it made me reevaluate what I was told. It made me get a skin that was a little bit thicker. And then it made me stubborn. It made me, the next time I entered something, I made sure I had, you wonder why I had binder like this with all of the little tabs and highlights and stuff. It's not just because I was Alan's apprentice. It was because somebody said, you didn't do a good enough job with this. And I went, oh yeah, okay then. Challenge
So it
taken.
was punishment documentation.
Yeah, sort of. Well, it wasn't punishment so much as it was, okay, that's what you want. This is what you get. I can do that. So yeah, I mean, but that's who I am. I'm not a kick me and roll over, but it did. I had a hard time with that. And it made me learn some things about myself because some of it was their fault and some of it was mine. And I had to say, okay, how much of this did I take too personally? And it was really good feedback, and how much of it was just mean, because there was some of that in there too. So
I had a not very positive experience at a Kingdom Arts and Sciences many, many years ago, like before 1995, with a blacksmithing entry that I did. And the feedback that I got at the time, there was one judge, not a Laurel. He was a knight. Was the only person around that could judge a blacksmithing entry. And it was just really odd. So, blacksmithing wasn't really my thing anyway. And so I just did other things.
Okay, so we have one more question in the live feed, but if you guys are doing okay, if you're holding up all right, I want to ask 2 more questions after that, because
Sure.
I promised that we'd get them last on the Laurel show, and they were ANS questions, so we pushed them, and I want to make sure we get them covered. All right, so the last live feed question comes from Baroness Rondelin, which is, what is the difference between a battle and a competition? So what's the difference between I think she's picking a fight.
Now, she just wants to say competition.
Battle happens at Gulf Wars and a competition happens everywhere else. I don't know, Adriana, what do you think?
I don't know. I mean, it's a war point, but I've never been in an arts and sciences battle.
Makes me think you ought to be doing it.
Were you not a Gulf Wars champion?
I was. Yes.
You won a war point. It kind of sounds like a battle.
Yeah.
Or this sounds like a lost opportunity for ANS battles.
I believe that we had something like that. You had a group champion some years ago where a group of people would have several entries. And it was either a shire or a barony or...
I would like to humbly suggest is you could get 2 kingdoms, have 20 artisans that compete directly. The winner gets to put a heavy fighter or a light fighter on the field to fight the other winners of that thing, and that's how you have a champions battle.
Well, now we've had that before in our kingdom, where the roses to fight in the Gulf Wars Rose battle, the tournament, you had to enter an arts and sciences competition. You didn't have to win anything, but you had to at least enter, which I think was fantastic. And I highly laud the Roses for doing that. We had some really fantastic first entries from fighters who actually had a really good experience. So I think that's awesome.
I did too.
So, but border raids used to be a battle. We used to have that during border raids. There was an arts and sciences competition sometimes, or battle between the 2 kingdoms.
Erik, you want to take that question from Her Majesty for me?
I will. And this is from Her Majesty. If a person entering a fair has a poor score, how does that affect their discussion in the circle?
I would say it depends. I would say it depends on whether or not what they're being discussed for is what they entered and got a poor score on, and why they got a poor score on it. I mean, if we're talking about you for, backwards bobbin weaving in green, and you do a backwards bobbin weaving in green entry, and it is not good, then of course it's going to affect you, the discussion we're having about you, because you've shown us that what we thought you knew about backwards bobbin weaving in green is really not what you know. And that you're not good at you're not good with that process, and teaching people how it's done and documenting it and doing the research and the final product. But if we're discussing you about, cooking in Elizabethan England, and you do a backwards bobbin weaving and green entry and it gets a 4, well, that's not really fantastic, but it's not really reflective on what we think your area of expertise is. I don't know. And
yeah, I agree. And, kudos to people who enter something that maybe isn't their specialty.
Yeah.
Trying something new, because they've entered, 12 regionals and 3 Kingdom Arts and Sciences with Elizabethan cooking. And they said, you know what? I want to learn something new.
Yeah. Yeah. We would hope. I would hope that if you are far enough along that pathway that to being an expert in a field, that you've entered in arts and sciences before and you understand the process, because that's part of what we do as Laurels is we give feedback to other artisans enough that you wouldn't enter backwards bobbin weaving and green and get a 2 on it because you just did a terrible job of it. That speaks of you as an artisan, I think at some level as an artisan, but I don't think it's the defining thing. I hope that's the right answer.
No, that's great.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And you don't have to, even though you've made something with the intent of entering it.
Yes.
If you don't feel like it's your best work, you do not have to enter it. Even though you feel like you've made this commitment and you've told people you're going to enter it, it's much better to say, this is not my best work. I'm not going to put it out there.
Can I qualify that by giving a pitch? You don't have to enter it for scoring. You can enter it for feedback.
Yes.
Without it being scored.
Yes, absolutely.
You can enter it just to display it if you think it's a really cool thing you did. Most people don't realize everybody thinks that everything you enter in arts and sciences. Now in Kingdom, pretty much we do scoring for the most part, but really in any regional fair, if you just want feedback on something, then enter it for feedback. We don't have to score you. And we can talk to you about your entry and give you ideas on how to improve it or tell you how cool you are because it doesn't need improvement and that you should enter it for scoring. And maybe next time you will.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good caveat.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So also from Her Majesty Esme, when judging an entry that you're not familiar with, how do you make decisions about its quality?
How well you documented your process, how good your resources are, how well you explained what you did. And sometimes we'll pull somebody else in. If there are 3 judges and we all look at each other and go, do you know something about this? Do you know? Hey, who in the hall might? And even if it's
they
not
don't have to be a Laurel, and they don't have to be, an artist.
We've pulled people in and said, hey, I know so-and-so's on the site who knows it. Like say it was an entry on stamping coins and I knew Jean-Claude was in the building. I'd be like, hey, go get Jean-Claude. He knows what he's talking about on this. He's not set to judge. So we try to find an expert if we can. And otherwise it really is on the onus of it. I think a lot of times, unfortunately, because arts and sciences is so vast and everybody has their own little corner of it that they know, it's not always possible for me to know everything about everything. And I'll admit, I don't know everything about everything. If it's a CNI entry, I'm going to run screaming in the other direction and go, please, no, not me. Don't make me. Because all I'm going to say is, oh, pretty. We try to find
10 people who will take your seat.
Yeah, exactly. And if there isn't, then I'm going to have to be stuck looking at what you said your technique was and do the best I can from that. So much does ride. There's a lot that rides on that documentation, especially if what you're doing is unusual. You need to be able to tell us what your process is and show us what your process was and tell us how it relates to your sources, your period sources, so we can make a determination of what it is. And is that fair? I don't know that it's necessarily fair, but we're doing the best we can. Everybody needs to understand, and that's how I would answer this question, is we are literally and honestly doing the best we can with every entry. And we try to handle it with as much grace and ability as we can. But we're not perfect. We're in no way perfect. And, I don't know backhanded basket weaving, and nobody else in the hall may. So we do the best we can with that.
And I think, excuse me, I think that's where our geek, and if we're doing face-to-face judging, excuse me, the best thing you can do is teach me. You teach me that about your project. Talk to me about it. Tell me about it. Geek out with me for a little while. Show me that you know what you're talking about. And most artisans will say, well, here's where I messed up. This is what I should have done, for whatever that's worth. But, teach us. Be a teacher.
Awesome. Good answers. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Those are great answers. So we do have Sir Jean-Claude. We do have your question about please give some examples of what not to do on an ANS entry. But we do not have that much time left in the night, so we'll let them answer some of those in the after show if you want to join us there. And I'm going to let Sir Erik kick off. Well, is it Erik's turn or mine? I've forgotten who's next. It's Erik's turn. Let's get to the shout outs.
Right. So at this point, we like to do shout outs to people who are doing good things in the kingdom. It can be other shows to watch or just people that have been doing a lot of things to support the kingdom. And normally I get the privilege of starting. So I want to give a shout out to all the people who work in the Minister of Children's office. Those people do a lot of work that a whole lot of people don't want to do. And that's oftentimes taken for granted, but people feel like they're entitled to have other people watch their children, like that's even the function of that office. So those people do yeoman's work. They're in many ways the heart of the kingdom, and they probably don't get nearly enough thanks, and they probably get taken for granted too much. So when you get an opportunity, you need to thank those people and do it as often as you can remember to. Everyone else. Mistress Gwynvin,
I want to give a shout out. I want to give a shout out to Sir Griffin and Mistress Ellen on the homecoming social that they do once a month. There's some really cool stuff happening on there. I know I came on the other night because Connell was going on to watch Hound and Stag do some fighting stuff, and I thought, I'll go on there and see what's going on. And turns out Countess Thorkatla was doing a pasta making class, a live pasta making class. And I was like, oh, hey, I had some semolina flour and some eggs and some salt. And I just grabbed it and I made pasta with her. And it was a lot of fun. And before I knew it, I'd been on there for like 3 hours and had a great time. And remembered some of the things I love about the SCA. That's my shout out, is to everybody who's doing anything to remind us why we still love this crazy organization we're in.
I have 2 shout outs. The first one's for Mistress Maudlin and keeping Stella Nova alive, especially during virtual SCA.
Thank you.
She is definitely, yeah, she is.
Mm-hmm.
That's, she's very passionate about that and about new artisans and encouraging people to enter arts and sciences. And she's, especially with virtual SCA, she really pushed that hard for new people. So that's my first. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, people do not realize how much work it takes, especially Stella Nova, to ensure that all of those artisans have mentors to work with and that they're getting a good mentoring experience. And then the judges, lining the judges up to make sure they have a good judging experience too. Overall, it's a tremendous amount of work, and she deserves all the credit in the world for that. She's pretty awesome.
She is. And the other person I want to shout out for is Mistress Minya Mittens, who, as our Kingdom Seneschal has really just been rocking it. So I know she gets a lot of questions.
So you kind of stole my shout out for Maudie.
Oh,
No, it's fine. It's fine. She's been a bit of a rock star, and we don't give enough credit where credit's due, and that's absolutely there. My other show shout out for tonight though is going to be live from Kaid, where you can go watch them tonight. One of the hosts there is Baron or Master Bjorn of the Northern Sea, who's a former Meridian and an amazing bard. But tonight they have Sir Griffin and Mistress Stephanie on, who will be talking about the Order of the Chalice. That'll start at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, so 10 p.m. Eastern. If that's too late for you, you can tune in here week after next to hear Duke John the Bear Killer and Countess Jane Falada and Duke Baru talk about the Chalice here. So, or you can watch live from Kaid on the replay. You can find them on Facebook under wait for it, live from Kaid.
and last week they had Baroness Liz talking about the Grand Chefs of the Mountain.
And there's going to be, by the way, a shout out to the Grand Chefs. There's going to be a round table at our Sphere by the Grand Chefs. So if you're interested in being a Meridian Grand Chef and you don't know what that is, but you think it might be kind of cool and you like to cook, you should come to it and find out. It's a pretty neat thing.
We'd like to thank our guests, Mistress Wuennemon and Mistress Adriana, for so graciously being here and not getting too upset as we totally lost the plot multiple times in this episode. I would apologize, but half of it was unintentional, and we were just doing it again. We'd also like to thank our support crew, Her Ladyship Jessica Vosprey, who pretty much runs about 60% of behind-the-scenes stuff that happened in this kingdom and probably the same amount in Trimaris. And honestly, Ulrich and I would be wandering in the dark, bumping into walls if it weren't for her. We'd also like to thank Mistress Adriana for writing our wonderful scripts, Her Excellency Katarina for keeping us somewhat on time, given our
she does her best.
The attention spans of goldfish. And we'd also like to thank Lord Kikuchi for technical support. And really, we also want to thank you because for some reason, week after week, you guys are showing up to see whatever nonsense we take part in. And you seem to at least somewhat enjoy our buffoonery. We want to thank you very much.
So normally I go on to talk about next week's episode, but I want to make a personal thank you to both of you for putting up with my my personal crusade against competition and fair and making sure in an attempt to help actually in my own really kind of messed up way, and I admit that. Thank you for being great sports. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And putting me in my place where I need to be. I love those. I love those passionate discussions. But hey, everyone, please join us next week, next Monday, March 15th, for our last episode in the Officer Series. In this portion of the Officer Series, we haven't forgotten the rest of the officers, but we figure about 4 weeks at a time on a specific subject is about all our audience can take. So we'll do a second set of officers shows. That'll include, next week we're going to combine three different offices: communications, social media, and web, where we'll be joined by Baroness Isabetta, the Kingdom Communications Officer, Baroness Genevieve, the Kingdom Social Media Officer, and the Honorable Lord Ian, the Kingdom Web Minister. And then somewhere in the future, we'll do a second batch of offices, which will include Parchment and Herald and probably Historian and Minister of Children. So we haven't forgotten about anybody. They're very important. It's just that about 4 weeks on a specific subject and our audience starts to get tired. And quite frankly, so do I. Erik's a champion. He can push through anything. I'm not.
So all of those are 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. And I also want to know, was anyone else disappointed when Ulrich got to the point about his own personal crusade and he didn't finish with Against the Dark Arts? Was it just me? All right. I felt like the ANS officer was the glorious time to say that. Anyway, if you're
I'm not Bart.
Look, man, if you can research it and you can document it, dark art away.
Yep.
I'm not Bart. I'm part of the dark arts. My pelican name, my pelican title. I don't go by Master. I go by Darth.
Yeah, whatever.
if you're somehow still watching this live, give us about 5 minutes for a break, and then feel free to run and or join us on the Zoom for the after show. Please watch the live feed comments on Facebook for the link. We'll hang out and chat for about a half an hour after the show. If Grafton Katerina hasn't bailed on us in disgust, she will be posting it right about now.
Jessica says, please, dear God, finish the show. Good night, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Oh, ow, they hurt me. We're